And so we're going to head to Colombia, and we're going to spend a little time with Cristal, who is a biopsychologist and the executive director and co-founder of Fundación Herencia Ambiental Caribe, from where she has promoted a work agenda for conservation of Colombia's natural and cultural heritage. So looking at those places where the biodiversity and the cultural richness, they come together. So her work is focused on strengthening governance to promote biodiversity conservation, also a strong emphasis in promoting the conservation of jaguars and understanding their role in shaping identity and culture. So let's get Cristal in live with us right now. Hey, Cristal, how you doing today?
Hi, Joe. Good morning from Colombia. I guess you are also in an early morning.
We are. We've been going, 6.5 hours so far. We've been bouncing all around and just meeting incredible people around the world, conservationists, scientists, researchers, explorers, filmmakers, and they've been sharing some amazing stories of biodiversity with us. Sometimes they're hard to hear when we hear about the losses, but other times the stories really give us hope as well. So it is great to be heading to Colombia and to have a chance to hear your story.
Great, Joe. Thank you so much. It is truly an honor for me to be here sharing this early morning with you and with everyone who around the world who's joining in, and also to be part of this amazing group of people trying to add our little grain of sand to conservation work and to taking care of Mother Earth. So today I'm going to show you a bit of what we do at Fundación Herencia. It's the short term, but it basically means Heritage Foundation. The long name is Environmental Heritage Foundation for the Caribbean, because we work mostly in the Caribbean of Colombia. Colombia is a Caribbean country, but it's also a Pacific. It's also an Amazon country. So we were pretty much everywhere. And I would like to present I have to say that because there always has to be a technical problem, I have one today. It's not going to stop me from sharing with you the information that I want to share with you, but it just means that we're going to have to watch. We're going to have to watch it in this size, the slideshow, and some of the videos are just, for some reason, too heavy, and we won't be able to see them. But we have a lot of material that I want to share, especially with the international audience, because I'm going to start with our work in the Amazon. This is my partner, co-founder, Carlos, who is also my husband. So this is a family thing. And here you see us working in a place called Chiribiquete. So I want to begin with the story of discovering Chiribiquete. The discovery of Chiribiquete, I want to start, happened in the 1980s. Carlos, our scientific director at the Fundación, was at the time director of the national parks. He was flying to the parks in the Amazon. And as you can imagine, in the 80s, early 90s, we didn't have all the technology that we have today with the GPS and the maps, Google Maps and Google Earth. So it was a very different story. And at that time, he was flying in a very small airplane to the southern parts of Colombia, right in the Amazon. But to do that, he had to stop in different places, leaving gas so that the small airplane could then stop again, get the fuel, and keep going. And a storm came. That storm changed not only our life, but it also changed a lot of things in Colombia. Normally, when you're flying through the Amazon, all you see is this, or the green forest below the clouds. What happened in that trip was that suddenly, because they had to kind of change their course to evade that storm, something happened that nobody knew we had in the Colombian Amazon. And that is these very tall rock mountains started appearing with what we know as tepuis. This is a rock formation that is very common it's the Guyanese Shield. If we remember from when we were in elementary school and and the whole planet was just one big continent, this is what's left of that one big continent. These rocks that form the Guyanese Shield, some are in Africa, some are in South America, but we didn't know that they went all the way into the Colombian Amazon. And this is basically what started a new discovery for us as Westerners, not for locals, obviously, of the Guyanese Shield in Colombia, a mountain range stretching right in the equator. And even though that trip, they couldn't get closer, following trips to the area started showing that this was really a truly amazing, different, and unique ecosystem in Colombia. It wasn't only until the 90s that finally some funds were able to do expeditions, to know about this place, to really start getting into the biology and the ecological characteristics. And of course, the information that was found was really amazing. Here you can see a little bit. We'll see if we can show this video. So this is sort of the scale of some of the places of the expeditions. Now, the truly amazing thing is that at one point, Carlos saw there were some marks on certain walls. His formation as an anthropologist and archaeologist showed him that that could be something different, something strange. And amazingly enough, sorry, I'm trying here to deal. When they were finally able to get walking to some of these walls, what was found is one of the biggest collections of rock art in a single site in the world, the rock art of Chiribiquete. It's not an easy place to get to, as you can see here. There's hardly any places for landing. It's a very pristine place. But sometimes, you can actually see the different color. Sometimes it's a natural oxidization color, but as you can see, when you finally you get to see these paintings. Now, these aren't just any regular paintings. When we were finally able to get to the expeditions to study those paintings, what we found is that most of these paintings are related to jaguars. Here you can see jaguars. There's jaguars, usually some jaguars can be up to 2 meters long. Other jaguars are tiny jaguars that you can't even see in what looks like this red stain. This isn't just a red stain. It's painting over painting over painting that forms that red paint. But you can actually, when you get to that, see tiny little, very impressive paintings of jaguars especially, but also of all the animals in the jungle. So here are some more of these pictures. Not just animals, we also see the people and a lot of the sacred plants. So this is one of the bigger jaguars. We identify the jaguars by the claws, the tail, and of course here the mouth with the big scary teeth. So I want to get to this because this is pretty amazing. And I want to thank Steve Winter from National Geographic, who came with us to one of the last expeditions and took many of these pictures, including this one, because of course the monkey crossing the paintings that only happens to people like Steve. So we started learning about this culture, studying the paintings. Carlos has done that. I'm not going to go into its interpretation. But this point, I want to say that it was fortunate that this discovery was made by the director of the national parks at the time, because that helped or paved the way for this Chiribiquete area to become the largest national park in Colombia, with over 3 million hectares, and also one of the biggest ones in the Americas. So these discoveries paved the way for working with the jaguar, which is one of our main points in our Heritage Foundation. And it also paved the way for trying to work not only the conservation of jaguars from the perspective of, from an ecological and natural perspective, but also from its meaning for the cultural traditions that live in well, not just in South America. The jaguar lives throughout the Americas. It goes from Argentina all the way to the United States, to the southern border with Mexico. And in all those pre-Hispanic cultures, the jaguar had a very important role. In many of those cultures that changed with the conquest, but in a lot of different cultures that have maintained that original cosmovision, we still see that the jaguar plays a very important role, and it brings a lot of messages that could be very important for us. So with that, I want to go more current times, and that is how we're working in the plan for feline conservation in the Caribbean, in the Colombian Caribbean. We have different jaguar corridors that we have been organizing and trying to work on in different parts. This is the Caribbean Sea. This is all the Colombian coast in the Caribbean. Over here would be Panama. And we started identifying what are the problems for the jaguar in this area, what are its connectivity patterns, and working with the local communities, with the government, in trying to make these corridors useful for these animals. So I want to go to another place right on the Caribbean. It's the Nevada of Santa Marta. This is the Sierra. It's right on the coast. It's the tallest mountain by the ocean in the world. It goes up to 6,000 meters. It's also the tallest point in Colombia, taller than the Andes. And this picture is taken from the beach, actually. This is what you see. And this is a very sacred place in Colombia. It's a place that during the conquest became the place for important indigenous communities to protect themselves, to be able to continue to thrive despite despite the conquest and the Spanish permanence in Colombia. This is what it looks like, the mountain, and over here the Caribbean. And it's a very sacred site. It's a site, fortunately, most of the area is a national park as well, co-managed with 4 indigenous groups that live here, who do not allow for normal people to go, not normal, but for, as they say, the younger brothers. They call us the younger brothers. It's and it's a site that is protected by them, and that has a lot of really amazing places, like the lost city of the Taironas. This old city was, again, discovered by Western civilization in the 1970s. It's one of the biggest pre-Columbian cities that exist, and it just showed amazing use of engineering and water management in the middle of a very steep mountain and just the jungle itself. So Sierra Nevada, in a study made about 10 years ago by Science Magazine, was declared as the #1 place, the most irreplaceable site on Earth for its cultural and natural richness. This is a place, one of the hotspots for endemic species, because it's, separate from the Andes. It does have some Andean elements, but it just made way for a lot of endemic species, especially birds. And there's so much more to discover that we still really don't know. By these cultures, this place is called the heart of the world. And here, the foundation established a research center, especially targeting jaguars. And we started a jaguar study that was done together with the indigenous groups. So we worked with the indigenous groups and with National Parks system in trying to see, putting camera traps and using all the scientific methods that we have for making sure that where these jaguars are, how they're moving, how are they connecting, and especially how are they connecting to the outside areas that are not within the national park system. So it was a very interesting way of working with indigenous groups. But I wanted to add that part of what we do at the Heritage Foundation is it's not just working with the local community so that they can lead the work, which is important, and it's part of what I'm showing here. But we also, in trying, and in this case, trying to save the jaguar means how do you conserve the jaguar from the locals' cosmovision? It's not just using camera traps, as we have learned here. The local indigenous groups in the Sierra have their own rights, their sacred sites and sacred rituals for working with the jaguar energies and for making sure that those jaguar energies will be conserved. So a big part of what we do is, as I said, trying to use other tools, local culture, to find other ways in which we can conserve jaguars and biodiversity in general. So this is what we do in the upper parts of the Sierra with the indigenous groups. But in the lower parts that are not national parks, we also work with the local folklore culture in finding different ways of trying to conserve the jaguar. Here in the lower parts, as you can imagine, as it happens all around the world with big felines, there is a competition between man and local felines for cows. And so what we did in this project, and what I want to show is with the community, we decided that, or following their line, that the best thing would be to have a group of cows that were called the jaguar group of cows. And these jaguar group, basically, they reproduce, and then when there is an accident and a jaguar uses or preys on one of their private cows, then they get one of the cows from the jaguar group of cows. And for this, we also use folklore. We use radio songs that will connect them to the jaguar, that will connect them to their ancestral roots. I want to move on to the jaguar corridor in Montes de María, another very important site, very well known in Colombia because unfortunately it was a site of a lot of civil war strife and just the presence of guerrillas and paramilitaries, one of the regions in Colombia most affected by the internal conflict. And as the peace process has unfolded in the last 10 years, a lot of the families that had been displaced from these mountainous area, these are probably the end of the Andes Mountains in the Caribbean, they were returning to the land. The government was helping these families return. And we became aware that this very unique ecosystem, the dry tropical forest, was in danger because it had been, and unfortunately, the war, nobody would enter these areas, and that meant that the ecological processes here had been in very good condition. But when the family started, the environmentalists became very afraid of what was going to happen to this last bit of dry tropical forest. So we decided, again, in partnership with other foundations and the national park system, that instead of buying the land and maybe causing another displacement to these people, this time for an environmental cause, or working against the local peasant families, we decided to partner with them and start working on corridors within these private lands. At this moment, we have 5,000 hectares that we're covering with these types of agreements, about 200 families. And These has allowed us to have 1,200 hectares of forest that is being conserved and under restoration. We have been able to spot 2 species that hadn't been spotted ever since the people started coming back in. One large feline, in this case the puma, and a spider monkey that is a subspecies endemic to Colombia. And with the people, we started working during fencing the areas of corridor that they had put in voluntarily for conservation. And right now, every year in that area, we have the Jaguar Festival with a lot of activities for education and for getting, again, that culture of protecting the jaguar and not seeing the jaguar as somebody that's as a bad animal, but as a part of our culture and our ancestry. And finally, to close, I would like to get back to Chiribiquete. I'm not sure if we're going to have, do we have time for a 10-minute video, Joe?
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. I went into the settings. Unfortunately, we don't.
Okay.
But if you share it with me, I can share it with with the festival.
It's in YouTube, so I will share it in the thing. And what I want to say is that basically this is a video that we did with the national government, the Ministry of Environment, and the Ministry of Culture of Colombia with our foundation. As part of declaring Chiribiquete a World Heritage Site in a category that is very unique. There's only 30 plus sites on planet Earth that are under the category of being natural and cultural World Heritage Site. Chiribiquete is one of those places. And so we made this video, which shows a lot of the details and a lot of the amazing things that made Chiribiquete a World Heritage Site. And ever since then, we've been working in trying to get the message out to the world. So we made a publication with the support of Suda, of a Colombian company. And all the proceeds of that book, which is an award-winning book, and have gone to funding projects in the areas around Chiribiquete, especially to work with the new generations in what we called being guardians of Chiribiquete. This book has been translated to Chinese, for example. This was a book made to commemorate the 40 years of diplomatic relations between Colombia and China. And with the funds from that book, we've been able to establish also not only educational programs, which is most of what we do, and educational material, but also we've had a museum to go to the areas near in the outskirts of Chiribiquete to show the people the incredible legacy that they have right in their backyard. We have also worked with Jaguara, this huge sculpture that was born in Burning Man about 4 years ago, right before the pandemic. And Jaguara is the way that we take that message on Chiribiquete and on the different values all around the world. Well, so far US and Colombia, but we hope to travel to different places taking this message. So this is here some of my information and Carlos's, and this is what I wanted to share with you, Joe. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we have some time for chatting.
We do have some time for a little chat. And yeah, after we log off today, if you want to email me the link, I'll drop it right into the chat, and I'll also make sure it goes out into something we push out to the participants after the event today.
Great.
Very cool. Well, you have sold me. It looks like just an absolutely beautiful place of the planet where that biodiversity and that culture come together so uniquely. So I envy the time that you get to spend in the field on these projects. Now, the jaguars that you talked about, I know farmers and people in communities kind of a very mixed relationship with jaguars. And I think the cattle program is an amazing idea to have to replace. And I'm wondering if over time, are you seeing the attitudes towards the jaguar changing? Are they becoming more positive?
Yes, it's not easy. It's not an easy job, and it has a lot to do. Part of what we study is the cultural aspect, because we are just sure that if we don't take into account the culture of the local communities and their relationship with animals such as the jaguar, then it's going to be very difficult to actually do something that stands over time to conserve the jaguar. So we've been working on this for about 20 years, 15 to 20 years, and we definitely see that in certain places there is a change. It's very hard because we have to understand that when the jaguar is a very strong spiritual figure for indigenous groups. It's the leader of the animals, it's the king of the jungle. And when the Spanish conquest came, they saw this as witchcraft and as a ritual for the jaguar. And so for many hundreds of years, the jaguar was seen as a devil. And that's how it was portrayed in the mainstream Catholic religion, was basically if you were working, having a relationship with the jaguar, then that meant you were doing something with the devil. That's literally how it was made. So for the few indigenous groups that were able to keep that culture, it was because whether they were very far and they weren't, they were able to maintain themselves far from that mainstream new way of civilization that was forming here. But for many others, they had to keep it secret. And also, it was taboo to talk about the jaguar. So in many communities that we still find that are, let's say, indigenous groups that are, but that live also in our, regular society, talking about the jaguar is very hard because it's definitely a taboo. And the fact that it was devilized also made it easier for ranchers to just kill jaguars that were coming in and eating their cattle. So to work against that is something very hard because it's just very ingrained in the culture. But what has been very interesting too is that the power of the jaguar is such that when you're able to cross that interim relationship of, let's not talk about the jaguar, and once you're able to cross that, and the power that the jaguar has is also amazing. So we've also been able to see how once you cross that border and once you have trust with the people and people can actually talk openly about it, all of a sudden new opportunities emerge. And all of a sudden the jaguar is an animal that everyone wants to, it's a key species. Everyone wants to know about it. Everyone wants to be part of it. An interesting story when we started working with the indigenous people in the Sierra Nevada, and they had never seen camera traps, and and we explained why they were important. And I remember one of these young indigenous people who was going to be being trained to be one of the monitors, and he said, "That's super easy. You want a picture of the jaguar? That's really easy. Just give me a camera and I'll just go. I know that." And he made it seem like the jaguar is our friend, and we can communicate with them, and we know exactly when they're going to go by. And I just thought, that's interesting. But what was amazing is that when he brought back his camera chip and we started looking at the pictures, his camera trap only had 3 pictures, and they were all a jaguar. It was the first time that he ever used this camera trap. So that in itself was an event that, stories were made about that, and it just opened the conversations. And once we started bringing in the cattle farmers to learn about this, it also catched on their attention. And as I said, that one project that I showed really quick with the cattle farmers was very interesting because it was built using some of the information that we had already worked with the indigenous groups, but applying it to what worked for them. down below in the lower parts. And music was a big thing. And this idea of the cattle group for replacing, it was their idea, and we just made it possible and found, and helped them make the rules for managing that. So it's been really interesting, and it's been very opening. And for sure, what I can say is that even though it's a hard thing, little by little, the jaguar has found a very interesting position in the Colombian general culture. 15 years ago, when we started working with jaguars, people didn't even know in Colombia that we had jaguars in Colombia. We are taught about the giraffe and the lion and the animals in Africa, and everybody knows about that. But very few people, and I'm included, I didn't know that there were jaguars in Colombia when I grew up. And so that has changed, and not just because of our work. It has changed because there's been a huge cultural movement in Colombia, and I would say all around the world, to move towards our ancestral knowledge, our ancestry, our local. And within that, in Colombia, there's been this huge change. I would say the jaguar is a huge icon right now. It's used in fashion industry. It's used in just everywhere. TV, you see it. It's like everywhere now, the jaguar. And it's part of that, as I said, it's part of that power that the jaguar has to jump from being the enemy into being these amazing figure that has a lot to teach us. And I didn't go into the teachings of the paintings and into that, but that's a whole chapter of what we've been working on. And those messages that those ancestral paintings have, and the role of the jaguar in trying to help do this huge shift that the planet needs right now, to do it quick so that we can support our own civilization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good news story to hear, the jaguar becoming such a popular figure in its own right in the country, and a huge step that kids know that they're there, because once you know something, once you love something, that's when you protect it. And so
Absolutely.
That sounds like great progress to me.
Absolutely. Chiribiquete, I have to say, was one of those well-kept secrets. Ever since the discovery in the 80s, we didn't have social media. You could keep secrets at that time. Now we can't keep the secret, and you also shouldn't. And that's one of the reasons that we have decided in the foundation to go out into the world with the books, with talks like this one.
Yeah.
I have to say, the July issue of National Geographic will include a short story on an expedition that we did with National Geographic a few months ago. So
Amazing.
that will be, you'll see pictures of also of our work there too during the expedition. And it's part of this going out to the world, because one foundation or even one government, even the government, is not enough to take care of this site. And it's a World Heritage Site. We should all over the planet care for this site and try to conserve it. It is one of the last pristine places on planet Earth. There's still communities of nomads, hunter-gatherers that live unconnected to our mainstream civilization, that have had no contact. We're trying to make sure that nobody goes there. If you're a Chiribiquete guardian, you say, I want to support expeditions to learn more about the site so we can take care of it, but not go for tourism reasons. And it really is just a magical place that I feel very honored to be able to work there and support the work to conserve it.
Yeah. Well, Cristal, thank you so much for taking us into that magical place. The work you're doing is incredible. I can only see it growing and more on the global stage. So thank you so much for doing that work. And then, of course, letting us steal some of your time to share it at the Global Biodiversity Festival.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for this opportunity, and good luck. I'll be connecting in and out to see some of the other presentations, because everyone here does really amazing work. So
Absolutely.
It's very inspiring. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Cristal.